Om Sahanavavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sah Viryam Karavavai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma Vidvishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Deva Maheshwara Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Samastajan Kalyane Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Sadgurum Brahma Vidvaram. Om Pathaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Prathitam Puranamuna Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitamritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatvamanusandathami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshinim Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudra Maruta Sunvanti Divyaistavaihi Vedai Sangha Padakrama Upanishadaihi Vayanti Yam Samagaha Dhyana Tadgatena Manasa Pashyanti Yam Yogina Yasyam Tam Navidusura Suragana Devaya Tasmai Namaha. Devaya Tasmai Namaha. So in the 6th chapter we saw the preparation for meditation and all the 10 steps. Today we will see the result of that meditation. So verse number 18, we are done till 17. Certain precautions were mentioned in 17, that is moderation. And preparation was mentioned in the first 10 verses, then the process was explained, then the precaution was given. Now we come to the result part. So the 18th verse gives a very nice analogy. Yada viniyatam chittam Atmanyeva vatisthate Nisprah sarvakamebhyah Yukta ityuchyate tada Yatha deepo nivatasthaha Ningate sopamasmrita Yogino yata chittasya Yunjato yogamatmanaha. So he says here that when the yada viniyatam chittam, when the mind has been controlled properly, atmanyeva avatisthate, and through contemplation it abides in the self. Nispraha sarva kamebhya, one becomes free from all the desires and the sense of incompleteness. Yukta ityuchyate tada, that time the person is called as one who has united himself with his true nature. So this is the meaning of the word yogi. In Gita, when the word yogi is used, in different contexts it means different things. Karma yogi means one who is serving the society selflessly. Here the word yogi means one who has known his own self and united with one's own true nature. So through contemplation that person has woken up, realized that I am not this finite entity, I am that infinite truth. And his personality is compared now with a flame. So he says, Yatha Deepo Nivatastha. Just like a lamp which is kept in a windless place. Meaning the air is there but the passing breeze, the winds are not blowing. So how steady the flame will be? Yatha Deepo Nivatastha Na Ingate. How that flame will not flicker. So flame in a windless spot, flame without a flicker. So steady is the mind of the yogi. It doesn't wander, it doesn't waver. Very steady. So Yatha Deepo Nivatastha Ningate Sopamasmata. Yogino Yata Chittasya. A person who has controlled the mind, is abiding in the self, such is the mind of that person. Yunjato Yogamatma. And that person moment to moment experiences one's own nature as happiness and bliss. So the mind of a person, even a meditator who is striving to unite with the self, the mind has to become steady. And when the mind will become steady, the example when we use the word nivata, vata means the winds. From this word comes also the word nirvana. Nirvana means moksha or freedom. So what is the meaning of that nirvana? Freedom from what? Freedom from the bondage of desires. Freedom from this notion that only when I get this then I will become happy. No dependence on anything outside. The more the desires are there, the more the mind is disturbed. And so desirelessness is a state which is a state of supreme bliss and happiness. In the world when we live, we think that when I fulfill a desire then I will be happy. But if we analyze our own deep sleep state, neither there is a desire, nor there are desirers, there is a desirer, nor is there a desire fulfillment, nor there are objects to fulfill the desire. In the absence of all of them, I am still happy. That's why people like to go to sleep. Because if in waking and dream one is not happy, at least in sleep one will be happy. So the notion that desire fulfillment leads to happiness is a false notion. In the absence of desirer, desiring and the desired object, I am still happy. But I just don't know. There is ignorance in that state. That state is experienced consciously by this yogi who has risen above all the desires. So the mind is very steady and is abiding in the self. Now comes the joy that that person experiences. So in the 21st verse he says, Sukham Atyantikam Yattad. Extreme happiness. Whatever you can imagine, that when all the desires of a person are fulfilled, what will be that happiness of that person? Only a hypothetical situation, but if you imagine whatever that is, Sukham Atyantikam Yattal, whatever you can imagine as the supreme happiness, Buddhi Grahyam Atindriyam. This yogi experiences happiness which is much, much, much beyond that. Why? Because the happiness that we experience is actually not happiness, it is excitement, pleasure, very temporary. It comes and goes. Again one wants the next desire to be fulfilled. But here is the happiness which transcends this duality, transcends pleasure and pain, happiness and sorrow. Buddhi Grahyam Atindriyam. It cannot be conceptualized by us. That is our true nature. That's why the word used for that is bliss. Vetriyatrana chaivayam sthitas chalati tattvataha. And how does that person experience that state? Is because there are no dualities and differences. Nacha evayam vetti. There is only experience of one infinite absolute reality. So to make us aware that that state when we transcend the buddhi is not a blank state. Because many people think like that. And that's why many people try in meditation to become blank. To become blank is not the purpose of meditation. We saw that in the beginning. To become thoughtless, to become blank, that is not the purpose. Purpose is to remove our false notions about ourselves. That I am this finite, limited entity who depends on things for happiness. That notion must go. And here the yogi has experienced that state where he has transcended that ignorance and come to realize that my nature is infinity and is firmly established in that. And what is the state of fulfillment? It is not a state of blank, but it is a state of that fulfillment. So the next line, next verse says, Yam labdva chaparam labham manyate na adhikam tata. Having gained that, there is nothing more to be gained for that person. You think in the world, whatever we gain, there is so much more to gain after that also. So what I did not have, now I put efforts and I gained it. For some time I am happy. Again there is something more to gain. So again the striving starts. So we go between this cycle of striving, result, achievement, emptiness. Striving, result, achievement, emptiness. This keeps going. A thinking person will ask that is there not something gaining which there is nothing more to be gained? I attain fulfillment. That's the difference between success and fulfillment. Success I can gain, fame I can gain, but still there is so much more to gain. But fulfillment is a state where the person feels so fulfilled inside that nothing more remains to be gained. For the worldly gains, if you see, we have to, the temporary happiness that we gain, for that there is a lot of compromise that one does sometimes, or the effort that is put in for it, the result is not proportionate. So much effort one puts in for a few seconds or a few minutes of that gain. Again one feels miserable. And one has to give a lot of energy, effort, time, resources to gain that worldly gain for some time. And one is always in fear that when this will end or when somebody else will take over. So the temporary happiness that one feels is limited by many of these. This state of fulfillment that is indicated here is not limited by any of these. There is no fear of losing it. That's why he says that Sthitas chalati tattvataha. One may say firmly established. Having gained it, it doesn't go. It is that permanent state of happiness. So many great masters, if you see, their lives are examples of that. Having experienced that state of bliss, even the most difficult moment of their life, they are not shaken. Actually, that's the next shloka which says that Yasmin sthito na dukkhena gurunapi vichalyate. Next line, not next shloka. Having established in that, heaviest of sorrows also don't shake up that person. You see so many of them. Jesus Christ, no problem even when they were crucifying him on the cross. Did not feel why this is happening to me. So examples you can see in the lives of so many. By the way, is there anything special today? 9/11 happened today. Anything else? Swami Vivekananda spoke at the World Parliament of Religions 121 years ago. He awakened the world to the glory of India. And his story is amazing, how he reached there. He was going in the ship, and in that ship he met with a person who was American. So they struck a conversation, and so this person asked him, "You are going there to address the World Parliament of Religions. Where will you stay?" He said, "I don't know. The Lord has brought me so far, He will take care. Maybe I may stay with you." So they were talking, and he did not know that this person is the convener of that World Parliament of Religions. Anyway, so when he reached there, the gentleman went, Vivekananda also went his way. But what happened is, he lost his luggage. Some confusion happened, and his whole luggage he lost. He is in an unknown country. There is nothing, no luggage that he has. All his clothes and everything gone. He does not have money also. And with that luggage went away that letter also, which was with which he was going to represent India in the World Parliament of Religions. Now what will he do there? Such a big city, he doesn't know anybody there. So somehow he found out, and he went to that office of that World Parliament of Religions, and then he told them there that I am so and so and I have come to represent India. So they said, "Where is your letter?" He said, "I lost it." He said, "How do we believe you?" And as they were talking there, that gentleman happened to come there. And then he referred to him, and then all that thing happened. So before he found out this office, what was he doing? He was sitting in a goods train and happily singing the verses of Kathopanishad. No tension, where the food will come from, who will take care of me, how will I go to that World Parliament of Religions. No stress, no worry, no tension, nothing. Many such examples you will find, that people who have established themselves in this state, nothing affects them. They remain so established in that peace and happiness. And that's what makes us hopeful that yes, there is a state of fulfillment which one can achieve. And so this is what the Gita says. This is verse number 22. It is a verse which is worth memorizing. That why should I realize the self? If at all somebody wants to know that why should I realize this self-knowledge? These are the two lines. Number one, having gained which nothing more remains to be gained. It is the ultimate gain, for which I don't have to lose anything, spend my effort, be insecure, be scared, none of that. And having established in that state, there is no more any sorrow that can disturb that person. Yasmin sthito na dukkhena guruna api vichalyate. So having said this, he moves on, and we go to verse number 29. So verse number 29 to 32, they are also the result of this contemplation. That how a person comes to have a vision of oneness. That even though one is living in the same world, where generally we find disturbance and corruption and violence and hatred and so many of these, how this person sees all of them as an expression of only one absolute self. So those four verses, 29, 30, 31, 32. We will take just one of them, others are very similar. So we will take 29th verse. Sarva bhutasthamaatmanam Sarva bhutani chatmani Ikshate yoga yuktatma Sarvatra samadarshanaha. So we say Sarva bhutastham atmanam. This person sees the same self in all the beings, and Sarva bhutani cha atmani, and sees all beings in the self, meaning there is no difference. If we say that I am seeing all the waves as water, so all the waves are in water. And if I am seeing water in all the waves, What does that mean? I am not seeing any difference between water and the wave. So in the same way, to see that all of them are expressions of one self, and that same self is, all the beings are in that same self, meaning there is no difference. We all are one at the spiritual level, and expressions of one absolute infinite truth. And whoever realizes this oneness goes beyond sorrow, goes beyond fear, goes beyond insecurity. And that's the ultimate goal of life. So these few verses, they explain this more and more. So out of such a person, you will find service happening, compassion overflowing, one will share the knowledge. So all these different masters who have realized the truth, they all become, in their presence one feels peace, happiness. A lot of their conflicts, people's conflicts, they settle down. So that's the ultimate state which the 6th chapter describes to us. So it is not a state of blankness, dullness, okay, when we go beyond body, mind, intellect, then I don't know what happens, it is dull, it is blank. It is something which is very strange. Very clear descriptions are given that this is what you will experience, and the lives of people you will see, whether it is Buddha or Jesus or any of our Indian saints here, or even there was one great saint called Saint Teresa of Avila. So many different people who have realized the absolute truth. Now Arjuna has heard all this. He said, this is very nice to hear, and beautiful state of equanimity and oneness and all that. But my mind is something else only. So he gives in two verses he expresses his problem. Let us see now, 33 and 34. Yoyam yogastvaya proktaha Samyena madhusudana Etasyaham na pashyami Chanchalatvat sthitim sthiram Chanchalam himana Krishna Pramathi balavadridham Tasyaham nigraham manye Vayoriva sudushkaram. So he says, Yoyam yoga svaya proktaha, this dhyan yoga that you just spoke about, Samyena Madhusudana, which speaks about equal vision, that all of us are one. Etasyaham na pashyami, I am not able to relate to that. Typical, like all of us, the situation of Arjuna is also very good, but no connection happening. So he says chanchalatvat. Why? Because my mind is very fickle. And now he describes 4 aspects of his mind. And he says, because of these I can't grasp. So please tell me what to do. He says, chanchalam hi mana Krishna. Krishna, my mind is very fickle. So one is that the mind is very fickle. It doesn't stay steady on one thought. It keeps jumping. Pramathi, extremely impulsive. There is no, that control is not enough. Impulsively anger will come, impulsively irritability will come, jealousy will come, passion will come. And when that impulsiveness comes, then one forgets all the knowledge one had. So one is it is restless, second is it is very impulsive. Then he says balavat, it is very strong and unyielding. With force we bring it back, again it goes back. So it doesn't want to yield, it is unyielding. And dridham, it gets attached very fast. Tasyaham nigraham manye vayoriva sudushkaram. To control such a mind, I find it very difficult. more difficult it is to control this mind than to control a storm. You can predict a storm and then you can take action. Even that storm, when it beyond a certain limit the wind blows, then it will become difficult. It can even become a typhoon and become very destructive. Still he says mind is more destructive than all that. Because these are four aspects of the mind. One is very restless and fickle. Two, very impulsive. Three, very strong and unyielding. And fourth, very easily it gets attached. So he says, because of this, I am not able to rise above the mind. You may say that that state of happiness is beyond the mind, but I am stuck in the mind because of these four. And even if I try to do meditation, no meditation happens, meditation only happens. My mind keeps going round. Now what to do? So Bhagavan replies, again this 35th verse is a verse which is worth memorizing. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Asamshayam Mahabaho Mano Durnigraham Chalam Abhyasena tu kaunteya Vairagyena cha grihyate. Second line is very important. So he says, Asamshayam Mahabaho, O mighty armed Arjun, no doubt mind is Mano Durnigraham Chalam, is very fickle and extremely difficult to control. He calls him Mahabaho, meaning you have mighty arms and you have acquired various skills and weapons. But a real Mahabaho is one who can master the mind, not just be proficient outside. So he says how to master now. 2 points he gives. Abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena cha grihyate. With Abhyas and Vairagya, you will attain this self-mastery where mind will become quiet. So 4 points that Arjun said. First one was fickle mind and second one was impulsive. These two are taken care by practice or Abhyas. And strong, unyielding nature and attachment is taken care of by Vairagya or dispassion. So that's the solution that Bhagavan gives. And remember, these solutions are not for Arjun only, these are for all of us. So if we think that these 4 or any of these 4 are our problem, then this solution we have to apply. And you will see the results of it. So what is Abhyas here? Abhyasa here is the practice of what? Practice of single pointedness. That I must practice single pointedness. How to practice single pointedness? 2 simple points. 1, do one thing at a time. This multitasking is a big myth. And that multitasking is what creates the division in the mind. One may feel I am very efficient because I can do many things at the same time. But today's psychological research has proved very, very clearly there is something called filter mechanism. What is filter mechanism in our mind? So right now if you are listening, your mind has filtered many things away. So the sounds of the car which is coming, and if any other thoughts and work and appointments and so many things that the mind is occupied with, all that is filtered. Now each work that we do brings a certain focus and filters out so many other things. Now when mind is doing multitasking, this capacity to filter becomes lesser and lesser. Why? Because let us say I am talking and driving the car. Now the filtering mechanism which is there in me, that is to that extent reduced, because now I have to pay attention to the phone also, to what the person is saying, then listen, then respond, and then drive and watch the road. So many things I have to do at the same time that the mind doesn't know now what to filter and what not to filter. This is, I am talking only two things. There are people who do 3-4 things at the same time. Mind gets, and that becomes a lifestyle, then the filtering mechanism of the mind goes away. Goes away means it becomes reduced. And they say that that is directly affecting the decision making. Because to make a decision, I should be able to filter out so many things. Consider 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pros, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cons, filter out the other data, and then you decide. That decision making capacity is affected tremendously when I do multitasking. Hence, people who do multitasking go through a lot of stress. Whereas the myth that one entertains is, when I do multitasking, I will get more work done, so I will have less stress. But it is exactly the other way. Because the mind doesn't know what to filter now. If I am only driving, the mind knows what to filter and everything else is out. Focus is on that. Same mind we are going to use in meditation. So when I sit to do meditation and I want to withdraw the attention and focus only on one mantra and only one thought, how will the mind do that? Because it is used to doing 2-3 things, so it doesn't know how to filter. And even if it knows, by habit it will want to do other things, because that's how it has been trained. So first point is, if I want to control my mind, if I want to have steadiness in meditation, I have to learn to do one thing at a time. I cannot do multitasking. In some rare situation, emergency or something, I do multitasking, that is okay, there is not a problem. But if I do multitasking as a regular feature, then I am training my mind to be dissipated. So one is to do one thing at a time, and that practice has to be done, abhyas. Second is to hold on to one support in meditation, as we saw mantra or a form or chakra or the breathing. Some support I must hold on to, and whenever the mind wanders somewhere else, I have to bring it back. So that abhyas of being steady in the thought flow, rather than allowing the thoughts to flow in many directions, that abhyas of single pointedness is very crucial. Now how will this take care of the impulsiveness and restlessness? Impulsiveness will get taken care of, and restlessness, because the support that I am training myself in, when I feel impulsive, I just need to hold on to that support. Impulsively I feel very angry. If my support is the breath, hold on to the breathing. At that moment, do the deep breathing. If my support is a mantra, let the mantra keep repeating in the mind. So that moment of impulsiveness will pass. And of course the fickleness goes, because whenever it goes away, I bring it back to the support. That's why we use the mala. Mala you can use in the beginning, as I had said yesterday also, it is only an aid. If the mind has become single pointed, you can put aside the mala and continue the chanting mentally. One doesn't have to keep on using the mala. It is only a tool to become single pointed. If the mind has got focused, put aside the mala, continue mentally. So our idea is not to keep the attention at the body level, it is to go deeper within. So now abhyasa is this. One is, in the daily life, do one thing at a time. Two is, let there be a support system. And three, the secret of single pointedness is love. So invoke that love and devotion for that support. So if it is a form, then we will love that form of the Lord, whether it is Krishna or Rama or Jesus or whoever it is. That form, I must love that form. When the love is there in the heart, there will be single pointedness. And what is the abhyas there? Abhyas there is to connect to that source of love. Whatever, through puja or a bhajan or by just talking to that Lord, anything, by which the mind gets absorbed in that state. To invoke the love in the heart, you may have to read, you may have to do satsang, come to know about the glories of the Lord, meet devotees of that particular, those who love that form of the Lord. Then that devotion will arise. These three things are very important to practice. One is, do one thing at a time. Two, use a support. Three, invoke devotion. This is as far as the first two problems are concerned. Next two problems, he says, abhyasa and vairagya. So vairagya is important there. What is vairagya? Vairagya is not renouncing the world and going into forest. Absence of strong likes and dislikes is called vairagya. It is not going away from whatever we like, because many people think like that. I like good food, I like good music, I like good clothes. अब क्या हो गया, वैराग्य हो गया. No interest in food, music, nothing. Become disinterested. No. It is not that drop everything that you like and go towards everything that you dislike. There is no joy in that. A lot of people don't come to spirituality because they think like that. I can't be spiritual because I have to give up everything that I like. Now, who said that? It is to rise above these, because these create the fluctuation. A strong like and a strong dislike is what makes us run behind things and run away from things. There should be flexibility, not rigidity. If I like only 4 vegetables, I am stuck. I am not stuck, my mother is stuck actually. But then she doesn't know what to cook. That is a strong like and then strong dislike towards other things. So then the rigidity comes in. So when I like something very strongly, automatically the mind is going to run towards it. When I don't like something, it is disturbed and agitated. How will I be able to meditate? It will run behind these two only. Run towards something, run away from something. In that way will I find peace. So vairagya is a very healthy state born out of clear perception that pleasure and pain are not what we seek. In every pleasure there is pain, and in every pain there is pleasure. If I understand that very clearly, I will remain focused on the goal of life and not allow likes and dislikes to sway my mind. So it is doing what is really good for me without being swayed by likes and dislikes. So if getting up early in the morning and going for jogging or exercise is good for the body, good for the sadhana, to do that is called vairagya. But if I don't do that and then I become a victim of sleep because I very strongly like that, then the attachment to sleep, that is what is creating the accumulated sorrow. One day the doctor will say, too much weight, too much obesity, start running please. Then I am forced to do it. And even after the doctor says I can't do, then gone. Heart says bas ho gaya. Gives up. So that strong attachment creates that problem to us. So the mind which is very alert, which does not fall for likes and dislikes, is the mind which is having vairagya. It is a different matter that when people go away into the forest, it's because they don't have interest. Genuinely one who has high levels of vairagya is not interested anymore in the pleasure pursuits of the life. Will say, give me my quiet time, I will sit quietly somewhere and I will do my own meditation and live a simpler life. Which everybody does or not. A scientist, does he not want to retire into his laboratory? He will want his peace and solitude, and then he will do his experiment because his whole focus is only that. One day somebody asked Einstein, Did you have lunch? He was walking on the road. So he said, if I am going towards my house, that means I didn't have. If I am coming away from it, that means I had. Means what? He is not bothered only at that level. His mind is in that science and whatever research he is doing there. Anybody, whoever, even an athlete who is focused on, training himself or herself, that person is going to keep aside so many things which are not. It is not that temptation is not there in their mind. They also feel, but then they are very clear that this is the purpose and then I have risen above all these. So I focus on this. That focus of the mind very clearly that the goal of life is to experience happiness within. And how long will I keep running behind temporary pleasures and getting disturbed? That is called Vairagya. Now both these are very crucial. Because if you understand one aspect, that why does the mind become fickle? Because something outside is tempting. And why is something outside tempting? Because Vairagya is not enough. So I think that happiness is there outside. So the mind is running there. Both this practice and Vairagya, they go together. Abhyasa and Vairagya. If I keep doing only practice, like so many people do, regularly and very religiously, very sincerely they will do. Either they will do regular puja or they will do continuous japa. But that is only practice. Nothing is done about Vairagya. So for that much time they may even be quiet. They may even feel nice. But at other times that impulsiveness is not reduced. The fickleness of the mind is not reduced. And that's why many people think, कि अरे आपके पूजा का क्या मतलब? Even after doing so much puja and japa, you are still getting angry. So there is no use of your spiritual knowledge. But the point there is that a person is only doing practice, nothing to do with Vairagya. So the mind is still fascinated by things outside and attached to it. And if it doesn't get it, it gets angry. And there are some people who will do only reading and intellectually they will say, where happiness, which happiness, there is no happiness in the world outside. And very nice in satsang, everything. Go outside and when Rasgulla comes in front of them, finished, all Vairagya disappears. And they don't sit and do any practice. So only simply intellectually reading and saying, I have Vairagya and I don't indulge in all this. And there is no practice of single pointedness that I can consciously sit down and withdraw the mind and see whether it focuses. So practice without Vairagya is suppression. And Vairagya without practice is shallow. It will not lead to any spiritual evolution. So they both are to go hand in hand. So if my mind is not coming under my control, I have to first work on Vairagya part. That what are my attachments? Why am I getting so swayed by all these? Learn, reflect on it. Okay, why is happiness not there in the world outside? And feel that part. Through reflection, through introspection, one has to feel. And how much will we eat and how much will we drink, how much will we dance, how much what, how much? Beyond a certain point, they become redundant. Slowly the mind which has done this kind of vivek will get that Vairagya. So a mind which does vivek only will get Vairagya, and that mind will be a healthy mind. Otherwise the word Vairagya is associated even with many different expressions. Somebody doesn't marry, say inko Vairagya ho gaya. Somebody, if there's a funeral that has happened and they have attended it and then they come back, then they start talking like that. What life, which life? He was talking to me yesterday morning and see now is a bundle of ash. What is the point in doing anything? That will last for 2 hours. Beyond that, gone. That is called Smashan Vairagya. It is not like that some flimsy thing. That suddenly because I don't want to do my duties and I escape, run away somewhere saying कि क्या हुआ वैराग्य हो गया. No, that is all useless. Real Vairagya is born out of Vivek. When I clearly think, analyze, based on right knowledge, that happiness is not outside, it is my nature, and I am able to actually live that. Buddha got Vairagya, no? That is real Vairagya based on Vivek. When he saw dead man, old man, sick man, then he started thinking. If his Vairagya was flimsy, he would have dropped at that moment and said, no, nothing, there is no need to do anything in life and go away from everything. He would have come back into samsara. But he did not do that. He went back home, he started thinking, and really when he felt that what is the purpose of this life? It is all meaningless if this is the ultimate state. And he reflected more and more on it. 22, 23 years he practiced. So many different things he tried. Then ultimately he came to that state where he said, desire is the root cause of sorrow. So the person who gets Vairagya, that Vairagya should be based on Vivek. Not some passing emotion or some fancy. Or some people take Vairagya because of lot of praise they will get. Because अरे ये तो मुनि बन गया. That and all is very flimsy. That one should not do that. Dangerous actually that is. So Vairagya and Vivek. Vivek leads to Vairagya. And when Vairagya is there, then sit for the spiritual practice and let the mind withdraw. You will see the difference. I am not saying don't do spiritual practice till then. That is not a license. Then you say Swamiji ne bola, till Vairagya doesn't come, don't sit. No. Continue the spiritual practice, but put efforts to develop that dislike and likes mastery over these. One simple way to do it, I have said this earlier also in second chapter. Every day do one thing that you dislike, which is dharmic. Vivekananda ji had said that. If I dislike brinjal, then I can eat brinjal. If I dislike a particular person, then I should go and meet that person. It is sadhana only, I am telling you. You will see that the rigidity of the mind goes away. The whole purpose of tapas is that, no? That if I love something a lot, I can keep myself away from it. And if I dislike something, I should go towards that and dissolve my likes and dislikes. That person can accept life as it comes. No insistence. Such a mind will be quiet in the mind. There is no disturbance. It will not keep running out. So Vairagya and Abhyasa, they go hand in hand. In other ways, we can also call it as willpower and intelligence. With willpower, how much will we control the mind? Through intelligent thinking and understanding that the nature of life is ephemeral. How long will I seek permanent happiness in the ephemeral world? I have to see that very clearly. Seeing means not physically. At the intellectual level, I must be able to appreciate and feel that part. Yes, it is temporary and I am done with it. Bas. How much is enough is a line that I have to draw for myself. There is no one particular line that everybody has to reach. Different people go through different experiences and they draw a line saying, ki bas, this is enough now, not more than that. You think about it, the amount of scams that are happening in our country, one of the reasons is because there is no line. How much is enough? There is no line only. So no matter how much one keeps getting, one is still running behind more. That's what the mind's tendency is. So I have to set for myself saying, ki bas, this is enough. How much will I want more? Let us turn within because that is ephemeral anyways. Even if I have crores and crores and crores, what will I do? I can eat that much only food and that much only water I can drink. Maximum I can use it to serve people around me. So if I understand that very clearly, then that mind is able to turn within. So that is called being intelligent and analyzing the nature of life. So no effort is put only to suppress through willpower. Both will go hand in hand. So in the meditation, the mind becomes quiet. In the daily life, one lives with self-control. So as a daily plan of action, if you want to implement, then we can implement in these 4 steps. Number 1 is sadhana for 20 minutes, which is abhyas. I sit down and do the meditation or whatever is my practice to make the mind quiet. Sadhana for 20 minutes. Then Swadhyay, sadhana and then Swadhyay. Study for 20 minutes. Where I get the knowledge, where I sit and reflect quietly. Sadhana 20 minutes, Swadhyaya 20 minutes. Sanyam is I live in self-control. Not for 20 minutes. Whole day. That I identify what are my attachments which throw me off balance, where I cannot control. I am a victim of that. It can be talking, it can be gossiping, it can be some food item, it can be anger, it can be anything. Where I am attached to that. I have to identify what is my attachment and reverse that. And last is seva. Let me serve the people around me. That seva is a bhav. That whatever I do, in that I should give more than what I take. If that attitude comes of giving more than what I take, is there in our Chinmaya Mission pledge also. Producing more than what we consume and giving more than what we take. Once that attitude comes, the mind is not waiting to receive and running behind pleasure. Mind is wanting to give, to serve. That service channelizes all our energies and mind into higher and higher realms. These 4, if we do, abhyas and vairagya will happen. By spiritual practice and sanyam, I am doing the, abhyasa. And by study and seva, I am cultivating vairagya. Such a person will be able to control. Bhagavan says that vairagyena cha grijyate. That person will control the mind. Now Arjuna asks a typical question. He says, Bhagavan, now let us say that I am living in self-control and I am striving for this state. But for some reason, I don't achieve that supreme realization. I don't know my own self and my body drops. Then what will my state be? Because neither I enjoyed the pleasures here nor did I get that. So all my effort went for a waste only. So he asked this question that please clarify, because you alone as the Lord of the universe can clarify to me what happens to such a person who is striving sincerely but without knowing the self, the body has dropped. So he gives the example of a cloud which is blown away by the winds, which does not give rains. It is a very promising rain-bearing cloud, and one feels that it is going to rain, and suddenly a powerful current of wind comes and then the whole cloud gets dispersed. So he says, will my state be like that? So 37, 38, 39 are those questions that he asks, and Bhagavan gives a beautiful answer. He says, Partha naiveha namutra vinashas tasya vidyate, 40th verse. Nahi kalyanakrit kaschit durgatim tatagacchati. The second line one should know. He says, the doer of the good shall not perish. And don't think that all your efforts have gone for a waste. Whatever you have put the effort, you will continue from there only. That's a promise that Bhagavan gives. Why? Because only body drops at the time of death. The sadhana is done by the mind. The same mind continues. According to its karma, whatever form it takes, but ultimately it will continue from where it left. And he gives two examples also. That such a person who is striving sincerely, but if that person has some more materialistic tendencies to enjoy, then that person will be born in the house in a royal family. So he says here that Prapya punya kritam lokan ushitva shashvati samaha shuchinam shrimatam gehe yoga bhrashto vijayate. Such a person is actually called as yoga bhrashta. Yoga bhrashta means he was walking the path of yoga, but for some reason he didn't realize the self and the body dropped, or he got distracted on the way with some past tendency which came up and the temptation overtook him. Such a person is called yoga bhrashta. So he says that such a person, the next birth that person will take will be in the house of a very rich person, Shrimatam Gehe. Why? Because that person has some material tendencies which he has to exhaust, and also that he will not have to struggle for survival, to take care of the basic food, water and shelter, so that he can focus on the higher pursuits of life. Because he was already on that track, just a few distractions came or maybe the body dropped. Hence he says, and you will see examples, Gurudeva, Vivekananda ji, they are such masters who were born in very royal families. But they were not people who were attached to those things, because their sadhana bal was so much. And if that person is extremely dispassionate, has no material tendencies, very, very sattvic in the mind, then what happens to that person? He may be born in the family of a yogi itself. So he says, Athava yogina meva, 42nd verse, Kule bhavati dhimatam. That wise person will be born in the house of a yogi. There may be difficulties in that house to even meet some basic needs, but the mind of this person is such that it doesn't get affected. And because he is born in the house of a yogi, it's very quick for that person to continue and realize. So people like Gyaneshwar Maharaj, they are born in such families. His father himself was a great spiritual person, even mother. And then his brothers, Nivrittinath, his sister also, Muktabai and then Sopandev, they only became his, Nivrittinath only became his guru also. So he was born in that kind of a family of a yogi where the environment is very conducive. So point that the Lord is making here is that a person should not have fear that what will happen to me if I do not realize, will my effort go for a waste? Nothing goes for a waste. Depending on what my karmas are, I will continue from where I left. This applies to everything, not only in this spiritual realm. Our whole life is a continuity. Just that the body is dropped. So it is not that what we do in this life ends with this life only. It continues. More so with spiritual aspect. That none of the spiritual efforts will ever go for a waste. So even if one good thought I have thought, it will create its impact. It doesn't go for a waste. Not a single thought goes for a waste. So that's the assurance that the Lord gives. And finally, we end with this 47th shloka. Yoginamapi sarvesham madgatena antaratmana Shraddhavan bhajate yo mam Same yukta tamo mataha. So he says amongst different types of yogis, yoginam api sarvesham madgatena antaratmana, one who knows me, meaning the Lord as the innermost self, Shraddhavan bhajate, and with devotion, faith, worship that Supreme Lord in one's own heart. Samyukta Tamo Mataha. That person, the Lord says, in my opinion, is the best person. So with this last verse, the Lord has actually put a, what do we say, the seed of the next chapter. The whole next section is a section of bhakti. First 6 chapter was Karma Yogas, next 6 chapter is, they are Bhakti Yoga. So with the last verse of 6th chapter, he has sown the seed of bhakti, saying that whoever considers the Lord as residing in their heart and worships the Lord with devotion and faith, that person he thinks is the best. So what is devotion? Who is a devotee? Who is the Lord? How does he express? So many aspects of bhakti that will come now from 7th chapter to 12th chapter. So that we will take up in our next